A single phone call. That's all it took to ground a $70 million aircraft strand, hundreds of passengers, and send an airline into a tailspin of chaos. This isn't a story about a bomb threat or a mechanical failure. This is the story of a first-class ticket, a dismissive flight attendant, and the moment a quiet, unassuming black woman was pushed too far. What could one passenger possibly say to wield the power to cancel an entire flight in a matter of seconds? The answer is far more shocking and has far higher stakes than you could ever imagine. And it led to one of the most brutal cases of real-life karma ever recorded. The sterile, climate-controlled air of the Polaris Lounge at San Francisco International Airport hummed with a quiet energy. It was a sanctuary of hushed conversations, the clinking of real silverware, and the scent of expensive coffee and leather. In a secluded corner away from the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the ballet of jets on the tarmac, sat Dr. Maya Johnson. To the casual observer, she was a portrait of understated elegance. Her tailored charcoal gray pantsuit was impeccably pressed, her low-heeled leather pumps polished to a soft gleam. A silk scarf with a subtle geometric pattern added a touch of color at her throat. Her hair was styled in neat professional locks pulled back from her face that was calm and focused. She wasn't scrolling on her phone or thumbing through a magazine. Her attention was solely on the sleek silver medical-grade transport cooler that sat on the seat beside her, its small digital display glowing with a steady, reassuring temperature reading. At 46, Dr. Johnson had earned her place in sanctuaries like this. She was one of the world's leading cardiothoracic surgeons, a pioneer in xenotransplantation and complex pediatric heart surgeries. Her hands, currently resting gently on her lap, had restarted the hearts of infants the size of a teacup and performed miracles that had been written up in medical journals across the globe. Today, she was the custodian of a miracle in a box. Inside that cooler, suspended in a state of cryopreservation, was a heart. Not just any heart, but a genetically engineered, lab-grown organ. A perfect one-of-a-kind match for a 17-year-old boy named Ethan Crawford, who lay waiting in a specialized ward at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. The flight was Global Charter Airlines Flight 714, a nonstop red-eye to Baltimore, Washington International. While it was a publicly bookable flight, its entire schedule, its very existence on this specific day had been orchestrated by the Crawford Foundation. They had essentially subsidized the flight to ensure this exact route was available at this exact time, with a seat in first class reserved for Dr. Johnson and her precious cargo. The logistics were a symphony of precision. The clock was ticking. From the moment the organ was activated, they had a window of less than 12 hours for it to be successfully transplanted. Every minute mattered. A polite chime announced the boarding call for her flight. Maya took a deep centering breath, gave the cooler's display one last check, and rose. She moved with an unhurried grace, her carry-on gliding silently behind her, the cooler held firmly in one hand. She presented her boarding pass, seat 2A in first class, to the gate agent, who smiled respectfully. "Have a wonderful flight, Dr. Johnson." As she walked down the jet bridge, a senior flight attendant with a stiff posture and a name tag that read Linda Harper stood at the aircraft door. Linda Harper was a purser with 22 years of service. In her mind, she was the gatekeeper of the premium cabin, the guardian of its perceived exclusivity. She greeted the passengers in front of Maya with practiced, toothy smiles. But as Dr. Johnson approached, Linda's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of something else, assessment suspicion. She watched Maya's simple, though expensive suit, her professional hairstyle, and her calm demeanor, and an ugly, preconceived narrative began to write itself in her mind. "Welcome aboard," Linda said, her tone a few degrees cooler than it had been for the previous passenger. "Thank you," Maya replied, preparing to turn left into the serene, spacious first-class cabin. Linda stepped subtly, blocking her path. "Can I just see your boarding pass one more time, please?" It was a standard request, but her tone made it feel anything but. Maya held it out. Linda took it, her eyes lingering on the seat 2A designation for a beat too long. "You're in the first-class cabin," she stated, as if it were a question. "Yes," Maya said, her voice even. "Seat 2A. Linda handed the pass back, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Right this way," she said, her gesture clipped and dismissive. Maya ignored the slight, her focus entirely on getting the cooler safely stowed and settling in for the journey. The first crack in the perfect, precise symphony of the day had appeared. But Dr. Johnson, ever the professional, was determined to ignore it. The mission was all that mattered. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 777 was an oasis of muted tones and brushed metal. Each seat was a self-contained pod offering privacy and luxury. Dr. Maya Johnson carefully placed the medical cooler under the seat in front of her, where it would be secure and within her sight for the entire flight. She settled into the plush leather of seat 2A, her body relaxing for the first time all day. She closed her eyes, visualizing the complex surgical procedure that lay ahead, the intricate dance of clamp sutures and bypass machines. The moment she would hold a young boy's life in her hands. A few minutes later, as the last of the first-class passengers were boarding, Linda Harper appeared at her seat. "Ma'am," she began, her voice low but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. "I'm going to have to ask you to move." Maya opened her eyes. "I'm sorry. This seat is reserved," Linda said, avoiding eye contact and instead looking at a manifest in her hand. "There must have been a mistake at the gate. My list shows this seat is for a Dr. Johnson." A quiet, weary sigh escaped Maya's lips. "I am Dr. Johnson." Linda finally looked at her, a skeptical frown etched on her face. "Right. Well, I need to see some identification." This was highly unusual. Boarding passes were scanned at the gate. ID was checked at security. A flight attendant demanding ID to verify a seat assignment was a clear breach of protocol designed for one purpose: intimidation. But Maya complied, pulling her driver's license from her wallet. "Maya Johnson, as you can see." Linda glanced at the ID and then back at her manifest. The frown deepened. "This manifest says the seat was booked for a VIP passenger, a surgeon." The implication was thick and insulting that Maya, a black woman, couldn't possibly be the important surgeon the airline was expecting. "I am a surgeon," Maya said, her voice losing its warmth and becoming as precise and clinical as a scalpel. "And I am in my assigned seat. Is there a problem?" In seat 3C, a man named Thomas Grant, a sharp-eyed corporate lawyer in his late 50s, lowered his newspaper. He'd noticed the flight attendant's initial coldness at the door, and he was now watching the interaction with growing alarm. Linda seemed to puff up with indignation. "The problem, ma'am," she said, leaning in and lowering her voice to a conspiratorial hiss, "is that passengers in coach are not permitted to just come up and sit in first class. Now, I'll give you one chance to go back to your real seat before I have to call the captain and have you removed for non-compliance." The accusation was so blatant, so steeped in prejudice, that it momentarily stunned Maya. She looked at Linda's smug face, at the self-satisfied certainty in her eyes. This woman wasn't making a mistake. She was executing a bias. She had looked at Dr. Maya Johnson and seen not a world-class surgeon but a trespasser. "There is no real seat in coach for me," Maya said, her voice dropping to a dangerously calm level. "This is my seat. 2A. I suggest you check your systems again, and then I suggest you leave me alone so I can prepare for the 5-hour flight and the 14-hour surgery I have to perform when I land." Her words, meant to end the confrontation, only seemed to fuel Linda's conviction. "Oh, a surgery!" She sneered, making air quotes with her fingers. "I've had enough of this. You're causing a disturbance." She straightened up, her voice now loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "I need you to gather your things and move to the back of the plane immediately." Heads turned. The quiet murmur of the cabin ceased. Thomas Grant in 3C folded his newspaper deliberately and placed it on his lap. "This is outrageous," he said, his voice clear and commanding. "This woman has done nothing wrong. I saw her board. I heard your accusations. You are harassing her." Linda shot him a venomous look. "Sir, this is a crew matter. Please stay out of it." She turned her attention back to Maya. "Last chance. Are you moving, or am I calling security at this point?" The co-pilot, hearing the commotion, alerted the captain. Captain Richard Cole, a veteran with a placid demeanor, emerged from the cockpit. "What's the trouble here, Linda?" Captain Linda said, her voice dripping with self-righteousness, "This passenger is refusing to leave a first-class seat. She claims to be a Dr. Johnson who has this seat reserved, but she's clearly lying. She's becoming disruptive." Captain Cole looked at Maya, then at Linda, a weary expression on his face. He was a man who hated conflict and preferred to trust his senior crew. "Ma'am," he said to Maya, his tone placating, "perhaps we could just clear this up. If there's been a mix-up—" "There is no mix-up," Maya interrupted, her patience finally snapping. She had remained calm, compliant, and professional. She had been insulted, accused, and threatened, and now the captain was siding with his prejudiced crew member, prioritizing a smooth departure over basic decency. The clock was ticking. The viability of the organ in the cooler depended on a stress-free, on-time flight. This circus of bigotry was creating a critical risk. She looked from the captain's indecisive face to Linda's triumphant sneer, and in that moment she made a decision. The symphony of precision had been shattered by a cacophony of prejudice. Protocol had been broken. The mission was now compromised. Dr. Maya Johnson reached into her handbag, but it wasn't for her ID this time. She pulled out a sleek satellite phone. Linda Harper scoffed. "Oh, who are you calling your lawyer?" Maya ignored her. She held Captain Richard Cole's gaze. "Captain," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion, "you have failed to control your crew. You have allowed a situation to escalate based on racial bias. As a result, you have compromised the integrity of this transport. You gave me no other choice." She dialed a single speed dial number. It rang once before a voice answered. "This is the command center." Maya's next words were spoken with chilling clarity, loud enough for the captain and Linda to hear every single one. "This is Dr. Johnson. Authenticate Nightingale 1. I am on GCA 714. The transport environment is no longer secure. The crew is hostile. I am declaring a code Umbra." A silence fell over the first-class cabin. A code Umbra. The words meant nothing to Linda or the other passengers, but in the cockpit the co-pilot's face went pale. He had seen the flight briefing. He knew what a code Umbra meant. Captain Cole stared at Maya, a dawning horror spreading across his features. "Ma'am, Dr. Johnson?" "You can't." Maya held up a hand, listening to the voice on the phone. She then spoke her final words into the device. "That is correct. The asset is at risk. By the authority granted to me by the Crawford Foundation and the Federal Aviation Administration under Special Transport Mandate 70B, I am canceling this flight effective immediately." The silence that followed Dr. Johnson's declaration was heavier than the aircraft itself. It was a dense, suffocating vacuum broken only by the faint hum of the cabin's ventilation system. The passengers exchanged bewildered glances. Canceling the flight. Was that even possible? It sounded like something out of a movie. Linda Harper's smug expression dissolved, replaced by slack-jawed disbelief. She let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You're what you're canceling the flight, lady. You are delusional. Captain Cole, airport security, and have this woman arrested." But Captain Cole wasn't looking at Linda. His eyes were locked on Dr. Johnson, and the color had drained from his face. The phrase, Special Transport Mandate 70B, had hit him like a physical blow. It was an obscure but incredibly powerful regulation he had only read about in senior training modules. A rule pertaining to critical, life-or-death national interest cargo, which gave the designated courier absolute authority over the transport's conditions up to and including the termination of the flight itself. He had never in his 30-year career imagined he would encounter it. Before he could even form a sentence, the cockpit call light flashed insistently. The first officer, who had been listening from the doorway, scrambled back to answer it. His voice was a hushed, panicked murmur. A few seconds later, he looked out at Captain Cole, his eyes wide with terror. "Captain, it's SFO Tower. They've just received a direct order from the FAA command center in D.C. Our flight clearance has been revoked. We're grounded." The words hung in the air, sharp and lethal. It was real. Linda stumbled back a step, her hand flying to her mouth. No, that's not possible. Her world, built on the rigid hierarchy of seniority and airline regulations, was crumbling around her. A passenger couldn't do this. A black woman in a pantsuit couldn't just say words and bring a multi-million-dollar operation to a screeching halt. It defied the very laws of the universe as she understood them. Dr. Johnson calmly disconnected the call on her satellite phone and placed it back in her bag. She looked at Captain Cole, her expression not one of triumph, but of profound disappointment. "As I said, Captain, you gave me no other choice. The protocol for a code Umbra is clear. Once the security of the transport is compromised by the crew, the mission is aborted and rerouted via a secure channel. The well-being of the asset is the only priority. The asset," the captain whispered, the pieces finally clicking into place. He glanced at the silver cooler under her seat. "My God, the organ." Thomas Grant, the lawyer in 3C, let out a low whistle. He was connecting the dots as well. This wasn't about an upgraded seat. This was about something life or death. The captain's intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Cole. There has been an unforeseen logistical issue. We are required to return to the gate. All passengers will need to deplane. We have no further information at this time. Cabin crew, prepare for return to gate." A wave of groans and frustrated murmurs swept through the entire plane. In economy, passengers began to grumble about missed connections and ruined plans. In first class, they just stared first at Dr. Johnson and then at a now ashen-faced Linda Harper. They had all been witnesses. They had seen the flight attendant's hostility, heard her accusations, and now they were witnessing the incomprehensible consequence. As the plane began its slow, ponderous push back toward the gate, the airline's machinery on the ground was exploding in chaos. In the Global Charter Airlines Operations Center screens flashed red. Stephen Harris, the vice president of West Coast Operations, had his phone pressed so hard to his ear it hurt. On the other end of the line was not some mid-level FAA official. It was Daniel Crawford, the Daniel Crawford billionaire philanthropist, technology magnate, and most importantly, the father of the boy for whom the heart was intended. His voice was not yelling. It was something far more terrifying, a low-controlled Arctic rage. I am currently looking at a live feed of GCA 7014, the flight my foundation paid 7 figures to secure, returning to the gate. My chief of logistics has just informed me that Dr. Johnson was forced to declare a code umbra due to crew harassment. Explain to me in very small words how you allowed your people to compromise a mission to save my son's life. Stephen Harris felt a cold sweat prickle his skin. Mr. Crawford, I'm just getting the details myself. There seems to have been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Crawford's voice dropped even further. Your purser accused one of the world's top surgeons of stealing a seat. She threatened to have her removed from the plane. She did this while Dr. Johnson was transporting a time-sensitive, irreplaceable biological asset. This is not a misunderstanding, Mr. Harris. This is a catastrophic failure. Back on the plane, the seatbelt sign pinged off as they docked at the gate. The jet bridge reconnected with a soft thud. No one moved. Every eye in the cabin was fixed on Linda Harper, who stood frozen in the galley, her face a mask of horrified realization. The entire edifice of her seniority, her authority, her carefully constructed world of rules and regulations had been obliterated by one woman's quiet, decisive action. She had picked a fight with the wrong person, not understanding that the woman she saw as an impostor held more power in that moment than the captain of the airline, and perhaps even the airport itself. The unraveling had only just begun. The moment the aircraft door opened, the atmosphere shifted from tense confusion to stark reality. 2 stern-faced individuals in dark suits, clearly not airline employees, briskly walked past the bewildered gate agent and onto the jet bridge. They were part of Daniel Crawford's private security and logistics team. They approached the first-class cabin with a single-minded purpose. One of them, a tall man with an earpiece, addressed Dr. Johnson with quiet respect. Dr. Johnson, I'm Michael, Mr. Crawford's head of logistics. We're here to escort you. The jet is being fueled on the private tarmac. Maya nodded, her composure unwavering. She retrieved the silver cooler, her movements deliberate and steady. She was no longer a passenger on Global Charter Airlines. She was now a mission-critical asset being extracted from a compromised zone. As she stood to leave, her eyes met Linda Harper's for a brief final moment. There was no pity in Maya's gaze, nor was there anger, only the cool, detached assessment of a surgeon observing a source of contamination that had been successfully excised. Linda flinched as if struck. The contempt she had shown just 20 minutes ago had curdled into a thick, paralyzing fear. She watched as the 2 men escorted Dr. Johnson and her precious cargo off the plane, treating her with a deference Linda reserved only for the airline's top executives. As Maya deplaned, the passengers finally began to stir, their quiet shock giving way to angry questions. What is going on? A man in business class demanded. Why was the flight cancelled? Captain Richard Cole, looking 10 years older than he had an hour ago, stepped out of the cockpit. His voice was hollow, the standard corporate apology rendered meaningless by the sheer strangeness of the situation. We will have to ask everyone to deplane. Please see the gate agents for rebooking information. I apologize for the inconvenience. Down on the tarmac, the situation was escalating at lightning speed. Stephen Harris, the airline's vice president of West Coast Operations, had broken every speed limit driving to the airport. He now stood beside the grounded 777, watching a sleek white Gulfstream jet taxi into a nearby position, its engines whining with urgency that mocked the silent, inert bulk of his company's aircraft. He was on the phone with the airline's legal counsel, and the news was grim. It's worse than we thought, the lawyer said. The Crawford Foundation isn't just suing for the cost of the flight. They're filing for gross negligence and endangerment. The contract we signed had a specific mission integrity clause. It stipulated that any delay or disruption caused by airline personnel that jeopardized the transport would result in a penalty of $50 million. $50 million, Harris repeated, feeling the blood drain from his face. $50 million plus all associated costs for the rerouting. And that's just the contract damages. We're looking at FAA violations on top of it. This isn't just a lawsuit, Stephen. This is a full-blown Category 5 catastrophe. Meanwhile, the deplaned passengers of GCA 714 flooded the terminal, a chaotic mob of anger and confusion. The gate agents had no answers, offering only flimsy meal vouchers and overwhelmed apologies. The story, however, was already taking shape. Thomas Grant, the lawyer from seat 3C, was surrounded by a small group of fellow first-class passengers. It was the flight attendant, he explained, his precise, authoritative voice cutting through the din. She targeted that woman from the moment she boarded, accused her of being in the wrong seat, threatened to have her removed. It was a disgusting display of prejudice. Turns out the woman she was harassing was the one person who could pull the plug on the whole operation. And she did. The story began to spread like wildfire. Whispers turned into phone calls turned into social media posts. The hashtags SureFlight714 and Global Charter Nightmare started trending within the hour. Passengers uploaded videos of the chaos telling their version of events, and the narrative was consistent. A flight attendant's bigotry had gotten an entire flight cancelled. Back in the now empty first-class cabin, Captain Cole sat in the pilot's seat, his head in his hands. Linda Harper stood in the galley being questioned by an irate Stephen Harris. "What were you thinking, Linda?" He seethed, his voice a low growl. "What could possibly have possessed you to do that?" Linda was trembling, her carefully maintained composure shattered. I thought she was lying. She didn't fit the profile. I was trying to protect the integrity of the cabin. Harris repeated, his voice laced with venom. "You just cost this company over $50 million. You've triggered an FAA investigation. You've made us the lead story on every news channel by tomorrow morning. All because you didn't like the look of a passenger who, in fact, was the most important person on this entire continent tonight." He pointed a shaking finger toward the door. "You are suspended pending termination. Get your things. An escort will see you out of the airport. Do not talk to anyone. You are now a legal liability of immense proportions." Linda stared at him, tears welling in her eyes. Her job, her reputation, her pension, all of it vaporized in a 20-minute standoff born of her own ugly assumptions. As she walked through the empty plane one last time, the ghost of Dr. Johnson's calm, disappointed face seemed to linger in every corner. She had poked a bear only to discover it was a dragon, and the fire was just beginning to rain down. As the Gulfstream G650 carrying Dr. Maya Johnson ascended into the night sky, leaving the chaos of San Francisco International Airport behind, the focus shifted from the drama on the ground to the silent ticking clock inside the silver cooler. Inside the luxurious cabin, Maya was not celebrating a victory. Her face was etched with grim, focused intensity. The confrontation had wasted nearly 45 minutes of a critically narrow window. She was now in a race against time, a race that had been needlessly handicapped. On a secure video call from a command center set up at Johns Hopkins, Daniel Crawford appeared, his face, usually a mask of corporate steel, but now filled with a father's raw anxiety. "Maya, what's the status of the asset?" he asked, his voice strained. Dr. Johnson was running a diagnostic on the cooler's environmental controls. "The internal temperature remained stable, Daniel. The stasis field was not compromised. Biometrically, it's still perfectly viable. But we've lost time. We'll be landing in Baltimore at approximately 6:15 a.m. Eastern. That pushes the start of the procedure back. The post-transplant viability window will be tighter. There's less room for error. Do what you need to do," Crawford said, his voice firm, his jaw tight. "Whatever you need when you land it will be there." To understand the magnitude of what Linda Harper had done, one had to understand the story of Ethan Crawford. Ethan was not just a wealthy man's son. He was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, a rare congenital defect where the left side of the heart is severely underdeveloped. He had survived 3 open heart surgeries before the age of 5. His life had been measured in medications and limits. No sports, no running. Sometimes not even a single flight of stairs without gasping for breath. By 17, his heart was failing catastrophically. A standard human heart transplant was not an option. Ethan's unique physiology and antibody profile meant his body would reject almost any donor organ. His only hope was a revolutionary experimental technology developed by a biotech firm heavily funded by the Crawford Foundation. Scientists had taken Ethan's own cells, reprogrammed them, and used them to grow a new heart on a biological scaffold. It was a perfect genetic match, a true medical miracle. The process had taken 2 years and cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and the only surgeon on earth with the skill, experience, and specific training to perform the transplant was Dr. Maya Johnson. She had been part of the project from the beginning. She knew the organ's unique cellular structure, its custom-designed vascular connections. Her hands were the only ones trusted to place this miracle of science into Ethan's chest. This was the asset whose transport Linda Harper had compromised. This was the VIP passenger she had refused to believe in. Her small act of prejudice hadn't just inconvenienced a traveler, it had jeopardized years of scientific research and the life of a young man. At Johns Hopkins, the surgical team was on standby. The operating room was prepped and sterile. Ethan lay in his hospital bed, aware that the heart that would save his life was currently flying across the country. He was scared, but hopeful. His parents, Daniel and Maria Crawford, kept vigil at his bedside. Their immense fortune was useless in that moment. They waited like any other parents praying for their child. The news of the flight cancellation had reached them through Daniel's frantic logistics team. For a terrifying half hour, all they knew was that the mission had been compromised. Maria had nearly collapsed, imagining a plane crash or a catastrophic failure of the transport unit. When the truth was revealed that the delay had been caused by a flight attendant's prejudice, their terror morphed into a cold, hard fury. Daniel Crawford was a man who understood power. He had built empires, disrupted industries, and bent markets to his will. Now he would direct that same relentless force toward global charter airlines. On another call to Stephen Harris, the beleaguered VP of Operations, his words were like sharpened blades. "I want the name of the flight attendant, the captain, every single person involved in this fiasco. My legal team will depose them all. We're not just suing you for damages, we're suing for punitive damages, for reckless endangerment. And I will personally fund a media campaign that will make your airline's name synonymous with incompetence and prejudice. By the time I'm finished, people will cross the street to avoid flying global charter." The threat was not idle. The full weight of the Crawford empire was about to descend upon the airline. But for now, all that mattered was the Gulfstream jet streaking across the dark American landscape, and the brilliant surgeon inside mentally preparing for the most important performance of her life. Her timeline now dangerously compressed by an act of senseless intolerance. While Dr. Maya Johnson was scrubbing in at Johns Hopkins, meticulously preparing to save a life, the life Linda Harper had nearly jeopardized was beginning to unravel in another way. The karma that found her was not a single thunderclap of fate, but a slow, grinding demolition that left no part of her world untouched. It began with professional annihilation. The summons to Global Chartered Airlines' corporate headquarters came via a cold, impersonal email the very next morning. The meeting was not in a familiar HR office, but in the sterile, intimidating expanse of the main executive boardroom on the top floor. The vast mahogany table reflected the grim gray sky outside, and at its head sat not just Stephen Harris, the vice president of West Coast operations, but also the airline's CEO, Michael Dalton, and a trio of lawyers whose faces were masks of predatory calm. There was no offer of coffee, no pleasantries. This was not a disciplinary hearing. It was a sentencing. "Miss Harper," Dalton began, his voice devoid of any warmth. "We have reviewed the captain's report, the statements from 10 separate first-class passengers, including one Mr. Thomas Grant of the law firm Grant, Adler and Vance, and we have listened to the audio from the cockpit recorder which captured your exchange with Dr. Johnson. The board has been briefed. Our primary shareholders have been placated. Now we deal with the source of the problem." Linda, sleepless and trembling, attempted to mount a defense. "Sir, with all due respect, I have 22 years of impeccable service. I was following my intuition. My job is to maintain the security and integrity of the premium cabin. The passenger was uncooperative and didn't seem to fit the VIP profile provided." One of the lawyers let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Fit the profile, Miss Harper? Do you know what the profile for Dr. Maya Johnson is? It's a woman who has won the Lasaska DeBakey Clinical Medical Research Award. It's a woman who holds patents for 3 different synthetic vascular grafts. It's a woman who Daniel Crawford, a man whose net worth exceeds the market cap of this airline, trusts with his son's life. Your intuition, as you call it, was nothing more than cheap, unadulterated prejudice, and it has set fire to this company." CEO Dalton slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a preliminary financial assessment of the damages. "Let me be clearer," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. "The penalty clause in our contract with the Crawford Foundation is $50 million. The cost of the grounded aircraft passenger reallocation and overtime is another $15 million. Our stock dropped 8% in pre-market trading this morning, representing a shareholder value loss of over $120 million. And the brand damage. The cost of the PR campaign to even begin to detoxify the global charter Linda meme that is now trending worldwide is immeasurable. All because you decided you were a better judge of character than a paid and confirmed ticket. He leaned forward. Your 22 years of service don't matter. Your pension is forfeited under the gross misconduct clause of your employment contract. You are terminated effective immediately. You will be escorted from the building. If you speak to the press, our lawsuit against you will not be merely financial. It will be personal, and we will litigate you into absolute oblivion. Is that understood? Her professional life ended in that room. Her security pass was deactivated before she even reached the elevator. The walk through the office was a gauntlet of averted eyes and sudden, intense interest in computer screens. Her former colleagues, people she had shared holidays and layovers with for 2 decades, looked right through her. She was no longer a person. She was a contamination. Her subsequent attempts to find work in the industry were humiliating exercises in futility. Her name was now infamous. She was a liability no airline would ever take on. Her career wasn't just over, it had been erased. A month later, the second blow landed. The thick envelope arrived not from Global Charter Airlines itself, but from their external litigation firm. The airline was making good on its threat. They were filing a civil lawsuit against Linda Harper, citing her role as a senior purser and the duty of care and professional responsibility she had flagrantly violated. They were holding her personally liable for a fraction of the damages. The number stated in the filing was staggering $2.5 million. Her lawyer, a weary public defender who looked at her with a mixture of pity and disbelief, explained the grim reality. They don't expect to ever get this money from you, Miss Harper. This isn't about recovery. It's about punishment. It's a PR move to show their shareholders and Daniel Crawford that they've thrown the book at you, then set the book on fire, and then buried the ashes. We can fight it, but they have unlimited legal resources. It will drain every cent you have, and you will still lose. He was right. The battle decimated her life savings. She sold her condo, the one tangible symbol of her successful career, to pay the mounting legal fees. She sold her car. She moved into a cramped, bleak apartment in a neighborhood she used to fly over at 30,000 feet without a second glance. The court eventually passed a summary judgment against her. Her wages from a soul-crushing job as a cashier at a big-box store where she had to endure the snickers of customers who recognized her were garnished. She was trapped in a financial prison, destined to work for the rest of her life to pay off a debt to the company she had given her life to. A debt born from a single ugly moment of pride and prejudice. The third act of Linda Harper's downfall was social exile. The news cycle was merciless. Linda became a caricature, a villain in the national drama. Cable news pundits used her as a symbol of everything wrong with customer service, with corporate America, with modern society. Viral videos dissected her actions frame by frame. Her photo was everywhere. She couldn't go to the grocery store without feeling the burn of strangers' stares, without hearing the hushed whispers. That's her. That's the flight attendant. Her social life evaporated overnight. Friends she had known for years suddenly became distant. Invitations to dinner parties stopped arriving. Phone calls went to voicemail and were never returned. People were afraid of the taint of association with the woman who had become a national punchline. Her sister Emily Harper was her only remaining pillar of support. But even her family felt the strain, fielding angry calls from distant relatives and suffering the embarrassment of their connection to the infamous airline Linda. She was an outcast, isolated in a world that seemed to despise her, haunted by a digital ghost of her own making that would follow her for the rest of her days. A year crawled by a year of humiliation and hardship. Then the universe decided it was time for the cruelest act. Her sister, Emily Harper, her one loyal confidant, began to feel unwell. It started with fatigue, then shortness of breath. The doctors were puzzled at first, but after a battery of tests, the diagnosis was delivered like a death sentence, a rare and brutally aggressive form of cardiomyopathy. Her heart was destroying itself. Local cardiologists were helpless. Emily's condition deteriorated at an alarming rate. Desperate, Linda spent her nights scouring the internet, selling what little she had left to pay for consultations. Finally, they found a sliver of hope, an experimental gene therapy and stem cell treatment program. It was revolutionary, groundbreaking, and their last chance. The program was only offered at one hospital in the world with the technology and expertise to administer it, Johns Hopkins. After months of frantic applications and pulling every string she could, Emily was accepted for a preliminary consultation. Linda drove her across 3 states, her stomach in knots with a mixture of terror and hope. They sat together in the polished, intimidating waiting room of the hospital's advanced cardiology wing. Finally, a nurse called Emily's name. They were led into a bright, modern consultation room. A few minutes later, the door opened and the medical team entered. Leading them was the head of the program, a woman whose calm, authoritative presence filled the room. She carried a tablet with Emily's medical data, her expression one of deep professional focus. She looked up from the tablet to greet her new patient and the accompanying family member. Her eyes, calm, intelligent, and piercing, met Linda's. It was Dr. Maya Johnson. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, the world stopped. The air in Linda's lungs turned to ice. It couldn't be. It was a cosmic joke of impossible cruelty. The woman whose reputation she had tried to tarnish, whose world-altering mission she had nearly wrecked, was now the one person on the planet who could save her sister's life. Dr. Johnson's expression did not change. There was no flicker of shock, no flash of vengeful recognition, no hint of their shared toxic history. If she recognized Linda, she gave no sign. Her focus was absolute. She was a doctor, and this was her patient. She turned her gentle, compassionate gaze to the frail young woman on the examination table. Emily Dr. Johnson began, her voice the epitome of reassuring competence. My name is Dr. Johnson. I've read your entire file. It's a complex case, but I believe our program has a very good chance of helping you. We're going to take very good care of you. Linda sat frozen in the corner chair, rendered utterly insignificant. This was the true karma. It wasn't revenge, it was irrelevance. She was nothing. Her past prejudice, her insults, her entire existence were meaningless in the face of this woman's profound dedication to her calling. She could only sit there, a silent ghost in the room, her heart pounding with shame and terror, forced to place all her hope for her sister's future into the skilled, steady hands of the woman she had been too blind and too small to ever truly see. The operating room at Johns Hopkins was a theater of hushed reverence, a sterile world bathed in the stark white light of surgical lamps. For 16 consecutive hours, Dr. Maya Johnson stood at its center, a bastion of unwavering focus. The procedure to place the bioengineered heart into Ethan Crawford's chest was every bit as complex as anticipated, a microscopic ballet requiring a level of artistry that few could comprehend. Her team, a hand-picked ensemble of the world's best, moved around her in a silent, practiced rhythm, anticipating her every need, every command. There was no thought of GCA 714, no memory of Linda Harper's sneering face. In this room, such worldly pettiness did not exist. There was only the mission. Dr. Johnson's hands, steady and sure, performed the intricate work of micro-roasting coronary arteries thinner than a strand of silk. She calibrated the aortic outflow with a precision measured in millimeters, her mind a supercomputer processing thousands of biometric data points simultaneously. The most critical moment came after the final connection was made, the delicate process of reperfusion allowing blood to flow into the new dormant organ for the first time. The team held a collective breath. The rhythmic beep of the heart-lung machine was the only sound. Dr. Johnson removed the final cross-clamp. "Stand by," she said, her voice a calm command that cut through the tension. Seconds stretched into an eternity. The monitor remained flat. Ethan's life hung suspended in that deafening silence. Then a single tentative spike on the ECG. A flutter, and then another. It was followed by a third, stronger beat. A perfect, steady, life-affirming rhythm began to fill the room, displayed in a vibrant green line on the monitor. The heart, a miracle of science and will, was beating. It was alive. A wave of palpable relief, a force almost physical in its intensity, washed through the operating room. Quiet murmurs of, "It's perfect," "incredible," rippled through the team. Dr. Johnson, however, remained motionless for another full minute, her eyes locked on the monitors, ensuring every pressure and output was optimal. Only then did she allow herself a small, weary nod. A beautiful union, she stated, her voice resonating with profound satisfaction. "Let's begin closing. He has a long life to start living." Ethan Crawford's recovery was a series of quiet miracles. A week after the surgery, his father, Daniel Crawford, stood by his bedside as a nurse removed his son's last oxygen tube. Ethan took a breath, a deep, shuddering, completely painless inhalation that filled his lungs to capacity for the first time in his 17 years of life. Tears streamed down the billionaire's face as he watched his son experience the simple, profound gift of air. 2 weeks later, Ethan took his first steps. His legs were shaky, but his chest was strong, a steady beat echoing where a fluttery weakness had always been. On the day of his discharge, the Crawford family met with Dr. Maya Johnson in her office. Daniel Crawford, a man accustomed to commanding every room he entered, was humbled and deferential. His voice thick with emotion, he began, "Maya, thanking you feels inadequate. You performed a miracle." He paused, his expression hardening, as he recalled the events that had nearly derailed everything. "You did it despite being subjected to a level of ignorance and disrespect that infuriates me to my core. The settlement with the airline is done. They will pay. But what they did to you, what they almost cost us, I will never forget." Dr. Johnson offered a gracious small smile. Her focus, as always, was on the path forward. "What matters, Daniel, is that Ethan is going home. The science worked, the team performed flawlessly. The rest is just noise. Your son's future is the only signal that matters." But the noise had permanent consequences for global charter airlines. The massive financial settlement was only the beginning. Under immense pressure from the FAA and the public, they were forced to create a mandatory company-wide diversity and implicit bias training program. In a move of supreme irony, they named it the GCA Horizon Initiative. And as part of their settlement, they humbly requested that Dr. Johnson herself consult on its curriculum. She agreed not for the airline's sake, but for the sake of future passengers who might look like her. A year later, a former colleague of Linda Harper's sat in a sterile conference room watching a training video. On the screen, Dr. Johnson spoke eloquently about the dangers of snap judgments and the responsibility that comes with authority. The lesson had been institutionalized, a permanent scar on the airline's culture. For Linda Harper, however, the lesson was far more personal and agonizing.